Hello there.
You're home early.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes when I'm at work, I'll start thinking about you and I'll just get...
Okay, maybe it's time to really talk.
No.
No?
No. I love you. Does he? Mrs. Smith?
Your wife, is she here? She all right?
I don't think she is. Are you listening to me, Rob?
In California, a rich aeronautics engineer named Theodore Ted Crawford lives with his wife Jennifer in a lavish mansion. Unlike his professional life, in which he's admired, respected, and quite successful, Ted's marriage has long lost its spark and become quite procedural. Soon, Ted learns that Jennifer is having an affair with a lieutenant in the local police department, Rob Nunali, and instead of confronting her, he keeps it to himself until he finds the best way to handle it. One afternoon, Ted concludes his meeting with his clients early, and without even giving them a chance to confirm his analysis, speeds out to a hotel where he suspects his wife and Rob would be. Before going inside, Ted calls the police station from a payphone, asks for the lieutenant, and learns that he will be on duty that night. Seemingly satisfied with this news, Ted calmly heads inside the hotel, where Jennifer and Rob are enjoying themselves at the pool, takes a moment to observe them having fun without a care in the world before sneaking into their room. There, Ted spends a few minutes staring at the messy bed, wondering where it all went wrong, and instead of using the opportunity to catch his wife red-handed and confront her, quietly heads back, leaving no trace of his presence. Meanwhile, blissfully unaware of the recent developments, the lieutenant and Jennifer continue to have fun and to enjoy each other's company. Deeply in love with his companion, Rob offers to take Jennifer to dinner so he can get to know her better. Terrified to be seen in public with him and the potential consequences, and hoping to return home before her husband does, Jennifer politely declines the offer and instead tries to distract him and changes the topic. Later, Jennifer returns to her lavish mansion, politely greets their gardener, Cairo, and rushes inside, where she's surprised to find her workaholic husband, who doesn't normally return from work until late at night, waiting for her. Suppressing her shock and dismay, Jennifer quietly greets Ted, who rants about how he feels about her before asking her if she still loves him. Struggling to manage the panic rising inside her, Jennifer tries to appear calm and, knowing there's no way she can give Ted the answer he wants and convince him, proceeds to the kitchen to prepare dinner, hoping he will drop his interrogation soon. However, this doesn't really work as Jennifer hoped, as Ted professes his love for her and asks her if her boyfriend loves her too. Utterly horrified by the question, Jennifer starts to apologize, but before she can even finish her sentence and explain herself, Ted shoots her from point-blank range. Terrified by the sound of the gunshot, Cairo rushes to the front door and asks if everyone is all right, while frantically banging on it to gain entrance. However, still calm, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened, Ted ignores the hysterical man, who soon calls the police, washes up, changes clothes, and meticulously burns off everything he was wearing. Soon, the police swarm the area and question Cairo, who tells them everything he knows. A few minutes later, Lieutenant Rob arrives on the scene, calls Ted, and as he introduces himself as the hostage negotiator assigned on duty, Ted quickly unlocks the front gate and lets him in. Surprised, the lieutenant cautiously heads to the house and, following Ted's request to speak to him alone, slowly peeks into the house to find out what's going on. Then, the lieutenant sees Ted holding a gun and asks him to hand it over so that they can discuss the situation. In response, Ted asks the lieutenant to do the same, and the men agree to both put down their weapons and start their discussion. Then, the lieutenant asks Ted about his wife, who Cairo had suspected may be hurt, and is surprised to hear Ted confess that he had suddenly gotten too agitated and shot her. As the lieutenant processes this and wonders if the poor woman is okay, Ted stoically points him to Jennifer's body. After taking a few steps towards the bloodied woman in front of him, the lieutenant is shocked to his core to identify the victim as his girlfriend and trembles. Desperate to help her, he runs to her side and starts searching for a pulse until Ted starts making inappropriate remarks, which pushes the lieutenant over the edge. Unable to control his rage, Rob lunges at Ted and starts beating him until the rest of the officers barge in to separate them, arrest Ted, and congratulate Rob on managing to subdue the criminal. The officers then rush to check on Jennifer, learn that she's still clinging on to dear life, and rush her to the hospital, where she's given emergency treatment. Meanwhile, unable to comprehend what he had just witnessed, Rob remains on the scene, frozen in shock and grief, wondering if Jennifer will ever make it. Forcing himself to move, Rob steps out to get some air and calm down and sees Ted, who's ominously smiling at him, as if he's satisfied with himself. Enraged, Rob heads back to the scene, finds his colleagues collecting the evidence, and orders them to compile an ironclad case before passing it off to the DA. Elsewhere, a young district attorney named William Willie Beecham, who has an impressive conviction rate, gets a job at the prestigious law firm Wooten and Sims and celebrates with his colleagues, who congratulate him on the life-changing career feat. Then, Willie receives a last-minute invitation to a fancy charity event organized by the owner of the law firm, Bert, becomes excited, and as he ponders where he can find a tuxedo, his boss, District Attorney Joe, calls him to his office to congratulate him on his new job and subtly asks him to turn it down and stay with them as they desperately need his expertise. Flattered by the praise, Willie politely explains that he's worked his whole career for such an opportunity and stands firm in his decision to leave. Then, after leaving his boss's office, Willie rushes back to his office to try on the rental tuxedo his assistant Mona had gotten him. And just as he puts it on, he gets a call from one of his colleagues, who proceeds to give him details of Ted's case, assures him that it's an open and shut case, sealed by a spontaneous signed confession from the defendant, and asks him to go to the arraignment, which is scheduled to be held in just a few minutes. Amused by the last-minute request, Willie tries to get out of taking a case he knows nothing about, but fails miserably. Hence, running out of time, Willie rushes to court still dressed in his tuxedo, and soon the arraignment commences. To the surprise of both the judge and Willie, despite his congestion, Ted pleads not guilty and announces his wish to represent himself. Seeing the amount of evidence stacked up against Ted, Willie tries to advise him to get a lawyer. But instead, Ted calmly stares at the young prosecutor, focused on his crooked bow tie and seemingly unaffected by everything that's going on around him, and, as if the crooked tie is the core of his problems, signals him to fix it. Unnerved by this, Willie subtly fixes the tie and continues to make his point. Smiling at the now fixed bow tie, Ted once again ignores the advice and surprises the room even further by asking the judge to skip the preliminary hearing and go straight to the trial. Concerned, the judge reminds Ted that he cannot use any of this as grounds for an appeal and asks him to reconsider and think about it all. To no avail. On behalf of the DA's office, Willie accepts the terms, and knowing that he won't be around to prosecute the seemingly insane man, informs the judge that someone else will take over the case and prepare for trial. However, Ted asks Willie to stay on, and to the shock of everyone, announces that he likes the young rising star. The judge then announces the case will go to trial at the first available date. While this session leaves everyone confused, Lieutenant Rob, who's quietly been attending the arraignment, follows Willie out to speak to him about the case.
Lieutenant, not only I took Crawford's confession. You should be taking this seriously. You know, be careful with this guy. There's something not right about it.
Took the gun out of his hand.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's done. Don't worry about it.
Willie then rushes to the charity event, where he meets a senior associate and his supervisor, Nikki Gardner. After introducing herself, Nikki, who's been baffled by the fact that the CEO, Bert, had time to interview a junior associate and hire him with immediate effect, formally welcomes the young man, who's excited by the prospect of joining the glamorous new world. Then, while Willie enjoys the lavish party, he gets a call from one of the detectives on the case, named Flores, who gives him the bewildering news that the gun that was recovered from the crime scene was never fired. Confused by this, Willie reminds the detective that Ted never left the house until he was arrested, which means the gun is still in the house, and advises the detective to go back to the house with his team and search every inch of it thoroughly. Forcing this bizarre information and the case out of his mind, Willie rejoins his colleagues, but instead of enjoying it, spends the whole time staring at Nikki, mesmerized by her beauty. The next morning, Willie wakes up early, and as he heads out to the Crawford residence to join the detectives on their search, he receives a call from an assistant at the law firm, asking him detailed questions about how he wants his new office decorated. Distracted by the case at hand, Willie promises to make his decision soon and proceeds inside.
So far, no weapon, no blood on his clothes. We found 4 shell casings, 45s wiped clean, no prints, and a gun that's never been fired.
She's pretty. But it's in the house, and I'll tell you why it's in the house. Because people were watching the house, and he never came out.
The next day, Willie goes to the law firm, where he meets his new assistant, to discuss the layout of his office and choose furniture. He then meets with Nikki, and she briefs him about their important client, named Warfield, who's accused of stealing millions of dollars from his company, tells him to catch up on months of deposition in just 2 weeks so that he can join them on their trip to Chicago to defend him, warns him that Burt is looking to test him with the case, and advises him to be ready. Excited by the new challenge, Willie informs Nikki that he will start preparing for it as soon as possible, and assures her that he's in the process of closing and handing over all of his cases at the DA's office. That afternoon at the DA's office, Willie is annoyed to see that Ted has marked and sent back all the files he had sent him as part of the discovery, and goes to prison to speak to him. There, despite having had some time to reflect on everything that happened, Ted remains as calm as ever and greets Willie with his taunting, ominous smile that the lawyer has come to associate with him. Ignoring this, Willie tries to get straight to the point, but before he can speak, Ted boldly asks how his comatose wife is doing and takes him by surprise. Determined not to engage in whatever mind game the defendant is playing, Willie, who's eager to get on with the trial and move on with his life, gets straight to the point and explains that the discovery files are for him to study and prepare his defense on. Seemingly enjoying himself, Ted points out that the prosecution hasn't really discovered anything useful and taunts him by asking if they have found the murder weapon. Willie tries to speed along the conversation and assures Ted that he doesn't need the gun to convict him, but is shocked when Ted accuses him of being too distracted by the Warfield case to spend enough time preparing for the case. While Willie is stunned speechless, Ted explains that he has hired a private investigator to learn about him and how he navigated his way through law school with a massive debt to become a DA with an impressive conviction rate. Now exasperated by the confusing defendant, who seems to care about everything else but his own case, Willie tries to change the subject back to the upcoming trial until Ted offers him a handsome pay to change sides, represent him in court, and be on the winning side. Flabbergasted, Willie politely declines, announces that he will see out his remaining few days at the DA's office as his prosecutor, and reminds him to prepare a witness list. Relaxing in his seat, Ted ominously reminds Willie that only guilty people need witnesses.
Not to investigate me.
Why not? You're investigating me.
Because you shot your wife.
Allegedly. Or have they found the gun?
I don't need the gun to convict you.
You know, my grandfather was an egg farmer. You hold an egg up to the light of a candle and you look for imperfections. You look closely enough, you'll find everything has a weak spot where it can break. Sooner or later. You're a winner, Willie.
This is so eerie. On the day of the trial, Willie wakes up early, prepares, and heads to court, ready to prove his case. In court, Willie calls the gardener, Ciro, as his first witness and questions him. Ciro narrates that on that fateful day, Ted had come home unusually early and waited for his wife to arrive, right after which the gunshots were heard. He then narrates that after his efforts to check on the couple failed, he had called the police, waited for them to arrive, and ascertained that no one had left or entered the house during that time. Seemingly unaffected by all of this, Ted sits in his chair, doodling his favorite, without even looking up once. Once Cairo finishes answering Willie's questions, Judge Robinson addresses Ted and informs him that he can also question the gardener. But instead, Ted politely greets Cairo and announces that he has no questions. Willie then calls an officer who had arrived on the scene first to the stand. The officer details that once they had suspected there was a hostage situation, they had called the SWAT, and a hostage negotiator affirmed that they had secured the perimeter and waited for them to take over. Still unbothered, Ted continues doodling without a care in the world. Willie ignores this unusual attitude of the defender and calls a forensic expert to the stand. The doctor details that Jennifer's severe injuries have caused irreparable damage to her frontal lobe. Willie then goes out on a limb and asks the doctor if the shooter who had inflicted such grave injuries meant to kill his victim. Before she could answer, Judge Robinson, who's perplexed by Ted's nonchalance, interrupts him from his drawing, which seems to be his sole focus, and gives him a chance to object to the line of questioning, citing that the doctor has no way of knowing his thought process. Ted once again waves this off and allows Willie to continue his questioning. Then, as his fourth witness, Willie calls Rob to the stand and questions him about the tragic night. Rob narrates every single detail of the incident, repeats his conversation with Ted as if he had memorized it word for word, and gives a detailed account of Ted's spontaneous verbal confession. Then, to the surprise of the judge, Ted, who had seemed totally uninterested by the proceedings so far, mutters his objection and is soon given a chance to elaborate.
I don't know what you'd call it, but I don't know the Legal terminology.
Well, why don't you try and explain it in layman's terms?
The victim. I'm sorry, Honor, but what would you call it legally when the officer who arrested you was having sexual intercourse with your wife?
Oh, what a way to express his first objection. The air is suddenly sucked out of the courtroom by the shocking revelation, and everyone remains frozen in place, trying to process the implication of the accusation, except Ted, who smiles at the chaos. Seeing the devastated look on Rob's face, Willie's heart sank to his stomach. Then, desperately hoping that this is just a made-up distraction by the erratic defendant, Willie slowly approaches Rob to confront him about the crucial piece of information as an infuriated Rob, who had gotten exposed so unexpectedly, lunges at Ted in front of everyone and has to be restrained by fellow officers. Once the chaos settles down, Willie and Ted are called to the judge's chambers to discuss the situation. With a smile on his face and as relaxed as ever, Ted stands by the accusation he's made and reveals that his private investigator has discovered many hotel records of Jennifer and Rob's affair and offers to share them with the court. To make matters worse for the prosecution, Ted reveals that his confession was made under duress while he was being attacked by Rob, and adds that he was terrified for his life when he wrote and signed it at the station as he was interrogated by his wife's lover, who had just attacked him.
Mr. Crawford was under duress. The confessions and any evidence gathered while Mr. Nunley was present will all have to be excluded as fruit of the poisonous tree.
This is a setup.
I'm sorry, Mr. Beecham, but I am not going to allow coerced confessions in my courtroom. The witness was intimate with the victim and assaulted the defendant during the arrest.
Quite contrary to the prosecutor, a calm Ted asks the judge to release him on bail in time for Thanksgiving, as the prosecution's case is seemingly faltering. After careful consideration, the judge gives Willie the long weekend to come up with new evidence and schedules to reconvene with them on Monday. Unable to think straight, Willie heads back to the DA's office, where he finds his boss waiting for him. Joe scolds Willie for his negligence and accuses him of being too distracted by the prospect of the new shining world of the law firm and dropping the ball on the case. Without giving Willie a chance to explain himself, Joe takes him off the case in hopes of doing some damage control, once again calls him out for being too arrogant, and begrudgingly remarks that he has left him with a massive blunder to clean up. That evening, Willie attends a lavish party at the law firm, where Nikki tells him that she had to fight hard on his behalf to convince Bert not to fire him after the embarrassing shenanigan that happened in court. Relieved to hear that he will no longer be working on the case, Nikki meets with Willie after the party, spends the night with him, and invites him to Thanksgiving dinner with her family. Later, Willie returns home and is annoyed to receive a box of broken eggshells. Enraged that Ted is enjoying himself at the cost of everyone else, Willie decides that he needs to stop the psychotic man and rushes to the DA's office, where he takes full responsibility for the embarrassment he caused the office and asks Joe to give him the case back. Amused by the request, Joe reminds Willie that if he were to lose the case after taking it back, he would stand to lose the new glamorous job and the future he's worked so hard for, and also his job as a prosecutor. Determined more than ever to put a stop to the madness, Willie accepts all the risks, assures his boss that the psychopathic defender won't get away with his crime, and jumps back on the case. Should you really stake your whole future on this case, Willie? As a first order of business, Willie rushes to the police station to speak to Detective Flores and discusses that they must find the gun that's surely still in the house, as there was no way Ted could have gotten it out. Sympathizing with Willie, the detective agrees to search the house with his team once more. Willie then tracks down Rob, who, in light of the affair, had a fallout with his wife and kids, is being stalked by the media, and scolds him for his poor decision-making. Still deeply wounded by everything, Rob shares that he never knew Jennifer's last name or address, that he had no idea that Ted knew about the affair, and explains that following Jennifer's strict rules, he used to meet her at a local hotel twice a week. The detective explains that Jennifer meant a lot to him, and pleads with Willie to get justice for her. Willie then heads to the hotel, visits the room Jennifer and Rob frequented, and asks for the surveillance footage from the day of the incident. He then goes to the Crawford residence, where he is devastated to find that after a thorough search, the detectives have once again come up short. Puzzled by the situation that seemed to defy logic, Willie goes to Ted's office to search for any clues and learn more about the meticulous defendant, and while he's there, he's shocked to receive a call from Ted, who, after taunting him and asking him the type of coffee he would like, asks him to have the trip he had planned with Jennifer canceled as he fears she might not be well enough to make it. Annoyed by the blatant mockery, Willie slams the phone shut and storms out of the office. As he drives away, Willie realizes that the once slum dunk case is slipping out of his hands with each second, and mentally goes through the case once more to figure out where he can find any evidence or witness that will support his cause, but fails miserably. Desperate, Willie goes to the hospital to visit Jennifer, who's the only witness that can credibly testify against Ted, sits by her bed, and reads her a book, hoping it will somehow keep her engaged enough and help her come out of her coma soon. However, the doctor soon informs him that his efforts won't count for much, as the extensive injuries have left too much damage. And even if Jennifer does miraculously come out of the coma, she won't even know how to speak, let alone take the stand. Discouraged by this, Willie heads back home, questioning everything and wondering if there's anything he can do to finally crack the old man's perfectly crafted case. The next day, while enjoying Thanksgiving dinner with Nikki and her family, Willie informs Nikki that he's back on the case, which throws her off. Furious by his decision, Nikki explains that his irrational decision makes her look like she has no control over the junior associate, who seems unprepared to join the corporate world. Stressed out, Willie reminds Nikki that he never asked her to fight for him. This offends her a great deal. Willie then thanks the family for inviting him and heads back home. When he gets there, Willie is surprised to find a desolate Rob waiting for him in his driveway and goes to speak with him.
Let's find it.
We can't. You want to move on?
I know a guy in the evidence room, and he owes me a favor. He can swap these for the shells and evidence.
Go home.
What else you got, man?
Go home.
Willie then gets inside and is relieved to find a voicemail waiting for him from the hotel, informing him that the security footage is ready. Ignoring Nikki's voicemail, Willie goes out to pick up the video, heads to the police station, and watches it with Detective Flores. In the footage, the duo sees Ted, who's wearing a large hat, entering the hotel on the day of the incident. Clearly able to recognize Ted, despite the hat, the detective urges Willie to use the footage to show Ted had learned about his wife's affair and hence had gone home to wait for her and attack her. However, Willie refuses to taint his case with the grainy video in which the hat clearly covers the defendant's face, and the desperate duo gets in a fight, blaming one another for the shortcomings of the case. Frustrated, Willie heads back to his house and gets a call from Rob, who tells him that he has successfully planted the murder weapon. This can't end well. On Monday morning, Willie heads to his office to prepare for the trial that's in a couple of hours and calls Mona to his office to talk to her.
I'm mad at you.
Oh, okay.
Can I ask you to do something for me this morning?
Yeah.
Could you sit outside the courtroom? Because I might call you. Come inside and whisper something in my ear about finding the murder weapon.
Mona and Willie head to the court, where the trial soon starts. Then, before Willie can address the court, Ted boldly submits a motion for acquittal on the grounds of lack of new evidence and even quotes the penal code. Amused by the sudden improvement of the defendant's legal skill, Judge Robinson asks Willie if he has discovered any new evidence. As Rob, Joe, and the whole courtroom hold their breath in anticipation, Willie asks for a moment to make a decision. Proceeds to call Mona, but realizes that he couldn't be the type of prosecutor who would fabricate evidence. Hence, to the utter devastation of the lieutenant and his boss, Willie informs the court that he doesn't have any new evidence. Surprised by this, the judge apologizes to the jury, dismisses them, and acquits Ted. Afterwards, Ted mocks both Willie and Rob as he passes them and follows everyone out of the courtroom. Still overwhelmed, a perplexed Willie remains in his seat, contemplating everything, until he receives a call from Nikki, who tries to comfort him on his loss. However, this conversation is interrupted by the sudden sound of a gunshot, and Willie drops everything to rush out to the hallways to find out what's going on. Once there, Willie learns that Rob, who had lost everything, including his reputation, could no longer take it, and hence has shot and killed himself. Utterly shocked by the tragedy, Willie takes a moment to gather his thoughts and wrap his mind around everything, while Ted, who's totally unaffected by the gruesome turn of events, shrugs it off and heads to his house. Once there, Ted returns his gun to its case, takes a moment to mentally analyze his carefully laid out plans, and smiles to himself, realizing that it couldn't have gone any better. The next morning, Ted heads to the hospital to visit his wife, finds Willie, who's been keeping her company, desperately wishing for some kind of miracle, and starts taunting him. Tired of all the back and forth games Ted seems to be enjoying, Willie ignores the old man and proceeds to leave until Ted, who, as the husband, has legal authority, threatens to take Jennifer off life support and end her life. Flabbergasted and scolding himself for not preparing for such a cruel eventuality, Willie scrambles to find a solution to rescue Jennifer, heads to the law firm to see Nikki, admits that he doesn't know much about civil court, and asks her help to get a restraining order against Ted and challenge his health proxy. Disappointed by his obsession with the case he already lost, Nikki explains that she can no longer make excuses for him with Bert, ignores his request, which she believes has nothing to do with her or the law firm, and heads out. Willie then rushes to the DA's office to ask Joe to help him get in touch with a civil court judge, and is instead shocked to learn that Ted has gotten a restraining order against him, citing his unwanted presence at the hospital. Joe then sternly reminds him that he has blown the only chance he had to convict Ted, who is now a free civilian, and advises him to stay away from him. How's he always a step ahead? Determined not to give up, Willie visits Nikki's father, Judge Gardner, and begs him for help. Sympathizing with the cause, the judge agrees to help, despite knowing that his orders will be overturned on appeal. With the signed order in hand, Willie drives like a maniac, runs through traffic lights, arrives at the hospital, but is devastated to learn that despite his best efforts, he's too late. Then, Willie, who has caused a scene trying to stop the procedure, is pinned to the ground by security and helplessly watches as Jennifer, the only witness who can put Ted away, flatlines and is pronounced dead. In the aftermath, fired from both the prestigious law firm and the DA's office, Willie is forced to reevaluate his life as he suddenly finds himself without prospects, and instead, the thought that his negligence awarded a psychopathic murderer his freedom. A few days later, once the dust settles, Joe visits Willie at his house and offers him his job back. Still hung up on the turbulent case, Willie politely declines the offer, discusses details of the case with his boss one more time, and escorts him out. Later that day, after reflecting on his conversation with his boss, Willie becomes inspired to study the case further and spends hours going over the files and similar cases. He then goes to the police station to discuss the case with Detective Flores and review the evidence again. Later, while Willie studies Rob's file, he notices the detective, who has a similar phone to his, accidentally take his phone, answer it, soon realizes that it's not his, and give it back. Suddenly having an epiphany that cracks the case wide open, Willie takes his phone back, realizes that Ted is on the other line, and begrudgingly talks to him. Blissfully unaware that Willie's still after him, Ted calmly informs Willie that he's going on a trip, bids him farewell, and informs him that he has left him a gift at his mansion. That night, unusually calm, Willie goes to Ted's house and, after gaining entrance, goes straight to the cabinet where the gun is kept and inspects it closely. Then, Willie, who has finally figured out how the crime was committed, narrates exactly how it happened.
I noticed something. You and Dudley have the exact same gun. You took his, you put yours in his place, and then you knew that he would just walk the murder weapon right out of the house, didn't you?
Wasn't just clever. Admit it, Willie. It was beautiful.
Then he used it on himself. I know exactly what you mean because I got the bullet, the one in your wife's head. That one we couldn't take out as long as she was alive.
I bet you don't even need a confession anymore, do you, Willie?
Assuming he's protected by double jeopardy, Ted spontaneously confesses and brags about how good it felt to shoot his wife for her betrayal, watch the life drain out of her, and adds that it was even better to see the horror in Rob's eyes when he discovered her body on the scene and desperately tried to revive her. As Willie watches in disgust, Ted continues congratulating himself on the beautifully crafted master plan and the excellent execution, and announces the law can never touch him now. Willie patiently lets the maniac finish his horrific outburst, and, for once the calm one, slowly informs him that since Jennifer was alive during the trial, he was tried for attempted murder, and now that she has died, he will be charged with murder, face a new trial, and go against all the newly discovered evidence and spontaneous confession. For the first time since the fateful night, a look of panic and nervousness is displayed on Ted's face as he realizes that he's been beaten at his own game, which he thought he had masterfully executed. Ted is then taken into custody by a delighted Detective Flores and his team and soon stands trial, during which he's surrounded by a team of defense attorneys. How are you going to get out of this one, Ted? As the trial begins, sitting alone on the prosecution side and confident in his case, Willie quietly signals Ted to fix his tie and smiles to himself when he does, amused at Ted's nervousness. Then, Willie prepares to make his opening statement. Finally, feeling at home and looking to continue making a difference by taking one criminal off the street at a time.